Oh, Star Wars, how I love you. Even though two-thirds of your mainline movies are deeply flawed,
I know I'm better than this.
and some of them are just plain bad,
I'm the spy.
even though your recent releases have, with the rare exception, been mediocre at best, even though most of the people currently in charge of you seem to be more interested in vapid self-expression than they are in the art of storytelling.
All the kids out there who will see themselves reflected in us, which is something that I
For the first time.
yeah, exactly.
I still love you, Star Wars. I won't ever not love you. Of course, this begs the question, why? Why do I still carry this great love for a franchise that has disappointed me time after time,
This is outrageous. It's unfair.
to the point that when a new Star Wars story comes out, I just don't care? The thing is, though, I do care. I care about Star Wars. I still very badly want its new releases to be good. I simply have no real reason to tune into the Acolyte or whatever Star Wars property has recently released when you're watching this video, other than to comment on the current pitiful state of the franchise. But that's not really what I'm here to do. There certainly is no shortage of voices decrying the failing of the latest movie or show, and while the hollow shell of a once great media company that is Disney deserves to be dragged through the mud for how poorly it has treated this beloved galaxy, my intention today is instead to offer a message of hope, and perhaps to rekindle within your heart, dear viewer, the flame of love for Star Wars that may be in danger of going out entirely. So rather than trudge through the latest slop that Lucasfilm has crapped out onto Disney Plus because it really isn't worth your while, let us rewind to 1977 and rediscover why, despite the best efforts of Kathleen Kennedy and company, Star Wars has stayed with us for these many long years.
For those that remain, there is but one choice. We must fight to victory or death.
Star Wars is, of course, a grand story of good versus evil with epic stakes, and yet at the same time a deeply personal narrative, in classic monomyth style, about a young man thrust into unimaginably dire circumstances who manages to grow into a hero, about a selfish ruffian who disregards the pursuit of riches to serve a greater cause, and about a fiercely courageous heroine uncowed by the evils she faces. But those are only some of the thematic elements of Star Wars. Stories cannot rely on themes, however admirable or inspiring those themes may be. A story needs substance. It needs quality writing and character development, creative and consistent world building, solid acting, captivating music, an intimidating villain, and so forth. How do stories excel in both areas? What makes for an acceptable theme and a quality substance? Those answers are going to be different because those elements are almost entirely separate from one another. The theme of a story should be in some way uplifting. That does not mean that every story has to be, as Star Wars is, about a young man who triumphs over personal tragedy, an unfathomable truth, insurmountable odds, and a cause thought to be lost. I say uplifting in the sense that the theme of a narrative should cause us to seek to be better, even if said story is a cautionary tale about a particular vice. A famous recent example would be Breaking Bad and the hubris of Walter White. But yes, sagas such as Star Wars are the purest and most straightforward examples of visual art that seeks to lift us up, to provide examples of characters who choose to look outside of themselves and beyond their own needs and wants, to inspire us to see with more than just our eyes, to awaken within us the desire to conquer even the unconquerable evils. But as mentioned earlier, all of that wonderful thematic material is nothing but window dressing if the substance of the story is found to be lacking in creativity, ingenuity, cleverness, imagination, etc.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
The character archetypes presented in Star Wars, while excellent, admirable, and inspiring in their own right, aren't exactly unique to that galaxy. The original trilogy's writing, while solid, was certainly not world-class, and the prequels, well...
Oh no, my friend. This is a mistake, a terrible mistake. They've gone...
But those movies never fell short in their inventiveness and creative vision in how they packaged and presented these well-known archetypes. Meanwhile, in Disney Star Wars, we have the Death Star times 5, and then the Death Star times 1,000. But it was not simply the movies or the characters within them, but rather the world that George Lucas created that has forever captured the hearts of so many fans, because that world was alive. It had innumerable planets, practically any technology you could dream up, thousands of different species and biomes, and quite simply endless possibilities. Talk about substance. Star Wars was absolutely overflowing with it. And creative people could take those worlds, those peoples, those times and seasons and simply create. for the love of creating, because they had dreamed up a story within the great universe of Star Wars and wanted to share it with people who loved that galaxy as much as they did. If you're looking at Star Wars, this IP you have just purchased for $4 billion, and wondering, how do we bring every demographic under the sun into our audience to yield the maximum possible profits? You won't create anything of worth. Not unless by some stroke of luck, you hand the reins to an incredibly talented individual who then hires other incredibly talented individuals and tells an amazing story that not only hits home thematically, but also happens to be one of the best written Star Wars stories maybe ever. People have accused Andor of not being Star Warsy enough, and I couldn't disagree more. No, there are no lightsabers, but there is still the fundamental metaphysical reality that the pursuit of wealth and comfort is insufficient, that sitting on the sidelines while darkness spreads across the galaxy is not an option any good man can choose. That yes, the struggle may seem never-ending and victory unattainable, but when faced with a choice between fighting evil or acquiescing to its domineering rule, we must choose the former even at great personal cost, because it is our duty. And we find this theme of duty reflected in, of all things, a much overlooked Star Wars video game from 2005. Yes, I finally got there. Star Wars Republic Commando tells the tale of 4 clones, 4 brothers, tasked with some of the most dangerous and important missions of the Clone Wars, fighting with little to no support, often deep in enemy territory.
Alone against all these droids? They don't stand a chance.
The commandos of Delta Squad rely on one another's skills, and more importantly, on the bonds they shared to get the job done.
Sev, how many kills you got today, Psycho?
With a new wise guy.
Keep this comm clear, you two. Calm down, Fixer. Just having a little fun.
Again, it is not an unfamiliar tale. Stories of men who find in combat no greater forger of brotherly bonds have been told and retold for centuries. I say that not to take away from this story due to its unoriginality, but rather to praise it, because it speaks to a universal truth that when we experience hardships, it need not be actual war, thank goodness, we become more closely bonded to those with whom we have shared these trials. Stories like Republic Commando echo this great truth spoken by real-life narratives such as Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, or Shakespeare's Henry V, from whose pages the phrase Band of Brothers originates.
We happy few, we band of brothers.
But it goes further than that. Because it exists in the fantastic world of Star Wars, the game's story can put a new spin on an existing formula in a way no other tale ever has. It shows us how these men, despite being clones, created and bred for the singular purpose of war,
Point me at the enemy and stay out of my way.
nonetheless still retain their humanity, their love for and loyalty to one another, and the pain such a love must cause when war and duty take their toll.
One commando is not worth risking an entire operation. One commando? He's talking about my pod brother.
We see the same and similar themes in the Clone Wars series, of course, which was, in my humble opinion, at its best when focusing on the men for whom it was named. In The Deserter, Rex and company discover a clone who saw his chance to leave the war effort behind and took it, becoming a husband, father, and farmer, embracing a life completely opposite of the one intended for him. We witness the struggle in his mind and in those of his fellow clones between the desires for freedom and duty, between loyalty to their cause and the brothers he was given, and loyalty to the family he has chosen. It's far more powerful and thought-provoking than most would expect from such a show.
This is your home, Cut. My family is elsewhere.
I could go on and on and on if I so desired. There are countless stories from Star Wars that are woven with uplifting and meaningful themes. Knights of the Old Republic highlights the truth that we can always choose what we do and thus who we are. That no matter our past, we have the possibility of redemption. The tragedy of Fives demonstrates how brotherly love will not let a man rest, will not easily accept lies as truth because they are convenient, and will drive him to great lengths for the sake of those whom he loves. And although that story arc ends in sorrow and loss, it nonetheless illuminates the fact that the good fight is worth fighting, even if it seems hopeless. You never know what action might light a spark.
But I owe it to Fives to record what I saw, that the inhibitor chips the Kaminoans put inside us have a purpose.
We fight knowing that a single spark of courage can ignite the fires of hope.
In case you didn't recognize that clip, it is from a trailer for Star Wars The Old Republic. If you somehow haven't seen them, go watch them. They're each less than 8 minutes long, and they are, to be quite blunt, exceptional. They will make you stop and wonder, why can't all Star Wars look and feel like this? That is, why can't our current Star Wars stories be crafted with the same amount of love, care, attention to detail, and exceptional world building that goes into these altogether too short advertisements for a video game? Though, to be fair, some recent creations have been crafted with that level of care and attention. The Bad Batch has had some episodes that hit home in beautiful and sorrowful fashion. The Outpost, anyone? Andor, as mentioned, takes the classic hero's journey and puts yet another new spin on it within the bounds of the universe, telling this tale as old as time with incredible cleverness, dexterity, and perfectly crafted dialogue.
I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, which aren't made by Disney anyway, feature a protagonist who seeks peace and happiness for himself and simultaneously wishes to continue the fight he refuses to consider lost. Echoing themes seen before in this video, these games make us witness them in a new light, wrapped up in a dangerous and exciting adventure across the galaxy. Okay, Sam, but what about the original trilogy? What about the ones that started it all? You've hardly mentioned them. My dear viewer, I have been talking about them this entire time. You said it yourself, they are the ones that started it all. Without that somewhat whiny orphan teenager on a moisture farm on Tatooine, none of this would have been possible. Think of all the themes I have mentioned in the past 10 minutes. The bonds of combat are shared by Luke and his fellow rebels, including Han Solo, who turned from a life wholly intent on personal gain to one devoted to service of others, even though it might cost him greatly. In Darth Vader becoming Anakin Skywalker once again, we witness the fundamental truth that no matter our failings, misdeeds, and sins, there is always the possibility to choose what is good, where so long we had chosen evil, and so to be truly changed and redeemed. And of course, in Luke himself, we are presented with the pains of loss, the struggle to accept one's duty, the consequences of impatience and impulsiveness even when well-intentioned, the rejection and eventual acceptance of an incomprehensibly awful truth, and finally, perhaps the greatest lesson of all, love is triumphant. It seems to me that people forget how Luke wins, through what means at the end of Return of the Jedi he emerges victorious. He doesn't. At least not in the manner that a conquering hero is expected to win. And he could have won in that fashion, but it would have cost him everything. On the verge of victory, he realizes this and tosses aside his weapon, choosing instead to trust in his father's love for him. Love is, after all, not some mere feeling, but rather the desire and the will to seek the good of others. And love is what we are made for. There is hardly a truth more fundamental to human existence than that.
I'll not leave you here. I've got to save you.
You already have.
Here, in the throne room of an evil empire that fights with an armada of thousands of ships, manned by millions of crewmen and soldiers aboard a weapon designed to kill billions, all that power is meaningless in the face of a son's love for his father and a father's love for his son. Could Luke have defeated the Emperor if he had finished what he had started with Vader and then turned his attention to Palpatine? Maybe. Probably not, though, since Luke did not know how to block Force lightning with a lightsaber, nor how to redirect it through his stomach and back out. But suppose he could have emerged victorious. He still would have lost. Luke would have killed in cold blood his own father. Such a deed would certainly change him, and not for the better. Instead, Luke simply did what was right, because it was right, as is the Jedi way.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Throughout the Clone Wars series, we see Anakin time after time choose the course of action that will most efficiently achieve his desired outcome.
What? He was gonna blow up the ship.
Now let's try that again.
And then we see the consequences of him doing so. Good cannot fight as evil does, or good will become evil. Where his father failed in this, Luke passes the test. And in doing so, he paves the path for the redemption of the greatest villain ever to grace the silver screen. I say all that for two main reasons. One, because as mentioned, I think many people fail to remember or understand how important Luke's decision was. Two, because Luke throwing away his lightsaber is the complete opposite of every poorly written strong woman girl boss protagonist from the past 10 years. Time and time again, we've seen studios shove out obnoxious, self-obsessed, alleged heroines whose only character arc is learning to not hold back, and that they are in fact amazing. These supposedly empowering figures do practically nothing that is actually inspiring, uplifting, or worth imitating. They just seize power that was, of course, already within them. Whereas the crowning moment of the character arc of Luke Skywalker, who is arguably the best known hero in cinematic history, is a rejection of power. Heroes do not seek influence, status, or power. Heroes seek love. They do not proclaim, "Here I am, look at me, celebrate me," because they do not think of themselves at all. They care only for their brothers, their friends, their fellow soldiers in the fight against evil, and all those whom they protect, guard, and cherish. Time and time again in the nearly 50 years since that opening text first crawled across the screen, the Star Wars universe has provided us with examples of stories of such heroes. Stories that were not only uplifting and inspiring in their themes, but also crafted with attention and care, brimming with creativity, intelligence, humor, and every other form of substance known to storytellers the world over. Nothing can ever untell those tales. From The Empire Strikes Back, to Clone Wars, to Republic Commando, to Knights of the Old Republic, to even those 6-minute cinematic trailers that I watch over and over again because they are just so insanely good. Those stories will stay with us as long as we live. Disney can't kill Star Wars. It doesn't have that power. They can buy the rights to the franchise, shove their morally bankrupt message into its universe, and try their rotten best to trample on everything we know and love, but ultimately, they will fail. They cannot destroy what has already been created. They cannot take away those stories from a galaxy far, far away that we hold so close to our hearts. Now, when people say Star Wars is dead, I don't entirely disagree with them, despite the title and content of this video. I'm certain that most of those people would agree with the majority of the points I've made here. I would suggest that we simply mean different things when we say dead in reference to a media franchise. What Disney absolutely has done is severely damage the excitement and enthusiasm of the Star Wars fan base by pumping out content that is, with rare exception, at best mediocre in terms of substance, frequently devoid of the meaningful and uplifting themes that pervaded prior stories, and created as either cheap member-berry bait,
hello there,
or as a vanity project for whoever penned the thing. Star Wars is not meant to be something you have on in the background while you scroll through TikTok on your phone. Star Wars is supposed to change your life. The stories from this galaxy should inspire us, should make us reflect on our own place in the world and the challenges we face, should push us to want to be better tomorrow than we are today, should make us look upward and outward away from ourselves and to those around us. That is, after all, the purpose of art. And Star Wars is intended to be art, not merely content. Thankfully, once created, art is not easily destroyed. The Acolyte, or whatever the latest Disney Plus slop is, will certainly fade into obscurity within a matter of months, but the Star Wars stories that really matter will live on. They will persist no matter how much the alleged writers at Lucasfilm try to subvert, undermine, and replace them. Because we care about them. We analyze the character arcs and discuss them with our friends. We rewatch scenes just for the joy of seeing the brilliant world building put into realization. We buy collectible helmets from our favorite niche story because they look awesome, and because we want to remember how those stories affected us when we first encountered them. No person and no mouse can destroy that. Don't let Disney kill your love of Star Wars just because they've grossly mistreated the galaxy they bought. Hold fast to those stories that you love. Remember them, revisit them, let them speak to you, perhaps in a way they never have before. Even if your enthusiasm for the next big release has petered out to the point of apathy, never forget what Star Wars has meant to you. Even if the last truly good Star Wars story has already come out, Star Wars will live on nonetheless. As long as we continue to watch, read, play, and pass on the stories that really matter, Star Wars will never die.